Centre for Cities team and so many of our partners here in Derby for what I hope to be a very, very interesting evening. So I'm going to make a few comments about the city. Most of you know our great city, but I just want to highlight a few things in that Derby is a proud city in terms of its heritage, and we're absolutely ambitious for our future, and we welcome the chance to debate the huge opportunities that the city has to build on up to 2020 and beyond. It's very timely that Derby is a city on the up. We're heading to Wembley next week, and we're going to get my tickets tomorrow. So that should be a sign for the future going forwards. And it's a sign that, as we are going to be as a city, the next year for us as an administration and as a city is that this is going to be a year for delivery on behalf of the city. We're going to deliver the Derby County team to the Premiership, and we're going to join the Premiership cities in the country as well. So, just to say, I'm sure you know, Derby has a long history of partnership working together with a strong economy in the city. It's the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution, and we are upgrading our silk mill for the very near future, which and others know all about. But we have a fantastic industrial manufacturing base in the city with Rolls-Royce, Bombardier, Toyota, and we're absolutely delighted to have welcomed recently the Nuclear AMRC to Infinity Park. Our export base and GDP is strong, and interestingly only 25% of exports are EU-based, and we have an absolutely strong international and global exportation from the city. In fact, Andrew, one of your recent reports highlighted that we're in the top, if not the top city for the percentage of our manufacturing goods from the city in terms of global exportation. And we're very proud of that, and we're glad that you recognise that. And we'll go from there. So the challenges for cities are not insignificant, not least the uncertainties caused by the B word, the demographic changes in cities and the opportunities and threats that digital technology presents have to be addressed. In Derby, we recognise the inequalities that exist in our city, and we're working towards raising the aspirations and the ambitions of everybody in our city to be where they should be. We do this through our boards, such as the Renaissance Board, many of whom are here tonight, the Health and Wellbeing Board that we've held today, and through our Opportunity Derby, our Derby Opportunity area as partners, we're also working to improve opportunity through education and to provide every child and young person with a chance to reach their full potential in life. We see the future for Derby as being extremely positive. We have HS2 in the wings, we have a great cultural offer, we have a fantastic nighttime economy, there's massive scope for regeneration and broadening our international trade links in particular. We have fantastic links in developing them with India, with Japan, in particular China. There will be some new announcements in the very near future in relation to developments on the China front. That said, we recognise that the city is not an island. Its economic geography is so important to its wider success. This is why we work closely with alliances such as the Midlands Engine, E2N2, Nottingham City through our metro strategy, and the three cities surrounding us. We're proud that the positive relationships in place and want to build on this, and we're working across the three cities in the East Midlands and looking wider to the west and beyond that. We're planning to hold a summit in the autumn, which we'll let you know all about, and we're going to put Derby on the East Midlands map, the Midlands map, the British map, and globally on the map as well. So those are our ambitions. That's what we're going to deliver. We're going to take this city forward with our partnerships helps, and it's important that the cities and our communities and partners speak as one. We need to influence government going forward, and I'm delighted that Centre for Cities has chosen Derby to host one of their prestigious events, and I look forward to hearing some bright ideas from you all. So please, if you join me in welcoming Andrew Carter, the Chief Executive of the Centre for Cities, who will be chairing today's session.
Wembley. So thank you all for coming. As Chris said, this is a session really to think about both where the city is, reflecting where it's been, and then think about what we need to do collectively, not just the public sector, not just the private sector, but all different interests coming together to think about how we make the next decade in Derby's long history a successful one. And as Chris said, it's the second of 3 events that we've done around this theme. So a couple of weeks ago we were in Doncaster, engaging with people there about where, some of the challenges they've had and have, but actually some of their ambitions for the future. And next month we will be in Liverpool looking at these sort of similar issues with the folk up there. We'll pause and we'll do some more in the second half of 19. And it's thinking about, and this is important from our point of view, it's thinking about and recognising the challenges that our places up and down the country have gone through over the last 10 years, which I'll say something in a minute, which are not insignificant, but also then always having a mind on, what we need to do in order to make our places really successful. And so I'm going to introduce my panel in a second, but just bear with me, because I think there are 4 very brief bits of context that you can get if you look at the document that is on your desk, or if you look at the various publications that we've produced in and around these subjects in relation to austerity. And I think the first point, Chris has already alluded to, cities are incredibly important. We say this as a glib statement, but it's actually true, and they are getting more important, not just for the success of Derby itself. So Derby isn't just important for the good folk who live and work in Derby, but the Midlands will not be successful if Derby is not successful, and the country will not be successful unless our cities like Derby and others across the country are more successful. The significance of cities is growing over time in the national context. That's an important point to make. So when we consider what needs to be done here, bearing in mind, there is a responsibility on you that sits outside of Derby, and you're playing a bigger role in terms of national prosperity. The second point I think is really important, and it comes through very clearly in this report, particularly chapter 2, if you're flicking through it, is that we cannot be in denial that over the last 10 years there has been quite significant public finance reductions going into places like Derby. In fact, our cities have been hit twice as hard in terms of public finance reductions than our rural areas. And places like Derby, cities in the Midlands and the North, have been hit harder than some of those cities in the South. Now I say that not because this is all terrible, but it provides a context that we need to be super aware of. The kind of cuts that we've seen in Derby are equivalent over that period to more than £220 per resident of Derby. Right? These are not small amounts of public monies that have been lost through an austerity program. We can debate the merits of that, but those are the facts. So there is less money in and around the system. The second point is, because of the less of the money and the way that demand has changed, what the money that is left is spent on has also changed. But before 2010, before 29, only 4 up to 63 places spent more than 50% of their budget on adult and children's social care. Now, more than half of those places spend half of their money on adult and social care. 52% of the public monies in and around Derby is spent on those sorts of things, which means obviously if we're spending more on those things, we are spending less by right on other things, whether it's the arts or whether it's libraries or whether it's street cleaning. Those things that make our places great places to live, to work and to play, some of the pressures we get squeezed as a result of that. So less money and what the money that we've got left is spent on has changed. So then my third bit of context really, or fourth bit of context, is, well, we've heard it from both our Prime Minister and our Chancellor, in the sense that they have both signalled that the programme of austerity is coming to an end. And it will be most defined and set out in the spending review, which is scheduled for the autumn of 2019. In the sense, the programme of austerity and the spending review will set out the spending envelope at the national scale for the next 3 years after that fact. So it gives us an ideal opportunity to both reflect on where we've got to, definitely look at the issues that we are and the successes that we've made, but make sure we're in a great place across the country and in a place like Derby, that when we get into this spending review that we are well placed to make the arguments about the kind of investments and the funding that places like Derby need. So that's the 4 bits of context that I wanted to share with you that we've been learning. So the purpose, I think, this evening is to unpack and explore that, and our panellists will do that. They promised me they will do this briefly. They will take a 5-minute up front just to lay out their initial thoughts. We'll then open it up for them to reflect on what they've heard, and indeed to get some questions and reflections from you. I will expect you to be brief in the points that you want to make. We are here to listen to our panellists, not to our audience. In the sense, you ask the question, they will answer, and if you carry on, I will cut you off when we get to that sort of point. Just give you a warning as to how I chair these sorts of things, so be prepared on that. So our panellists are Carole Mills, Chief Executive of Derby City Council; Claire Twells, Partner at Smith Partnership; Andy Storer, Chief Executive of the Nuclear AMRC, you're probably going to need to say what that is; and Adam Buss, who everybody, well, undoubtedly know, Chief Executive of Derby Quad. That's the order that we're going to do that in. 5 minutes apiece, open the floor, and we'll finish somewhere around 6:30, should the formal proceedings. So, Carole, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Andrew. Well, I suppose I'm still quite new around here. I've been in post for about 9 months now, joined last August. So I've been asked to share with you some reflections on what I've found since I've been here, and thoughts about what next, really. So I suppose my reflection since joining is, well, we undertook a pretty comprehensive stocktake or diagnostic of where we are as a city and where we are as a council. And it's clear to me that Derby is truly a community city, very proud of its heritage. People who live in Derby love Derby, and it really hits you when you come in as a newcomer. We're in a great location, we've got a very strong manufacturing base, and we're very diverse, and we have a huge amount to offer. So lots of positives. And if we look at partnership working, which is everything these days, no organisation can do anything in isolation. I've been really impressed by the level of commitment and participation and engagement from all our partners. That said, I do think we need to raise our positive profile a bit as a city. We've been a bit too modest, hidden our light under a bushel. You don't hear about the great things Derby does nearly as much as we ought to outside our boundaries. And if we do that, we can more effectively influence the debate and encourage the inward investment into our city, whether that's through the D2M2 rep that's been recently refreshed, or Midlands Engine, or more directly nationally and internationally, because we have to be global players. We do indeed have quite a few challenges there, I think it's fair to say. We've got some pockets of high deprivation in our city and some very concerning inequalities as well across health and education, and that absolutely impacts on people's life chances within our boundaries and beyond. And of course we have all the ones that Andrew's alluded to, like ageing population, but we also have outward migration. Some of our talent is leaking into other parts of the country, particularly the West Midlands. We've got issues around social mobility and housing and the ongoing impact of austerity. So I look forward to the end of it because it has really created some challenges for us here in our region. So we might have to look at our vision, I think, for the city, and we're doing that at the moment as a council. And the council and its partners have rightly, I feel, recently focused on closing the gaps, whether they're health or economic gaps or well-being gaps. Because all the evidence is telling us that that's a key issue, and I'm not suggesting for a moment we stop doing that, but I do think the time is right for a more fundamental, forward-thinking, ambitious vision for a much longer-term perspective, 2030, 2040 and beyond, so that we really take our place in the region and the world, and we want to engage with our partners in the coming months to achieve that. And we want to really place ourselves more to influence government. The landscape is changing, it's very uncertain. Brexit, what does that mean for us? What does it mean for the country? Where are we going to go? How do we harness the collective power of our communities, our voluntary sector and our creative industries, and our manufacturing base, of course, of which we're so rightly proud. And I do think there is a time now for government to let go of this and give us some freedoms and flexibilities to work around that. So if I was to sort of play fantasy sort of future for us, really, we do need to sort Brexit one way or another, whatever our personal views on it. It's proved a huge distraction. There's been a stalling of progress and a lack of capacity nationally to make inroads into some of the challenges and opportunities that I've discussed. And it would be good to have details ASAP really on how the shared prosperity fund is going to work. And we do need a longer term perspective from government, in particular around funding. You know, funding us year to year does not enable us to plan, and we are key place shapers and placemakers. That's one of our main roles as a council. But if we're living hand to mouth and trying to balance a budget month to month, year to year, with all the challenges and demand pressures we have, that makes it very difficult for us to be a great partner to the rest of the city and to our region. So a 3 to 5 year funding settlement is critical, I think, not just to provide stability, but to provide a really great foundation from which we can grow and build our place. I do think greater financing powers and flexibilities for our reps would be a good thing. They're going to be critical in supporting the infrastructure, regen and digital projects, just to name a few. So they need to be set free rather. And we do really need to just get on with finally sorting social care funding on a sustainable basis. This is not going away. I know it's really difficult and people are going to be upset and we'll have to consider tax and how it all works. But it's only going to get worse until we just cross that level. You know, it's going to be impossible really to plan. And the NHS local plan needs to be reformulated. And finally, a plea for councils really. I know sometimes one of the services we provide to our community is somebody to blame when it all goes wrong. And I'm not pretending for a moment we always get things right, because we don't. But if we're going to take our place as makers and shapers of our city and do the same as part of our region and our nation, we need more flexibility, more trust to raise our own funding. We need a self-sustaining financial system, removing caps on things like council tax, making sure we have the flexibility on business rates, and allowing us to do what we need to that's right proper for our particular place. And that would also be very good. That's what I'll say.
Very good, fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. Carole, Claire.
Good evening. I'm Claire Twells. I'm the Business Development Partner at Smith Partnership. We're local firm solicitors. We have 7 offices across the East Midlands, and our head office is here in Derby. We employ over 200 staff across the East Midlands, and 2/3 of that are based in Derby. And I really wanted to bring a bit of personalisation as to how Austerity has hit our business as a city centre business. It's recently directly affected our business. In approximately 3 years ago, we looked to move our head office, and we looked around the city, and we looked at different locations around the city to see whether they were suitable for our business. We needed to house around 120 staff, and we needed around 15,000 square feet. There were no available spaces within the city centre where we could locate those staff into offices that were of the right quality. So we viewed a number of sites outside the city centre. We looked at areas such as out of the airport, Chesterfield, Hilton, Chester Green. And it's fair to say that over the last 10 to 15 years has seen any private sector development in the office sector in the city centre, and this has directly affected us. We discussed with the City Council various sites. We looked at Bold Lane site and we looked at the Cathedral Green site, but we needed a site for us as soon as possible, and these plots were in their infancy and still are. A lack of development in part has been created by Austerity. It's meant that we had a real dilemma because we didn't know whether to stay in the city centre or whether we should move out. We consulted with our staff about moving out of the city centre, and there was real issues raised by our clients about infrastructure. When we looked at the remarks made by our clients about us moving out of the city centre with regards to infrastructure and how they would get to us, those comments were also mirrored by our staff and how they would actually get to work. The lack of investment in infrastructure in and around the city was a real issue also for us. After quite some time and some deliberation, we found an alternative site in the city centre, which was an abandoned building in the Cathedral Quarter. The building was earmarked to be a restaurant or commercial unit. We're now settled into that building, and we've made it into our own in terms of the standards that were required, because there was nothing available in the city centre. High streets and city centres across the country are facing a real crisis, and Derby is no different. Local authorities need to be given greater flexibility by the government to respond to challenges which are unique to their own cities and towns. In Derby's case, there needs to be the freedom for the council to change rates on rental properties and to encourage the use of vacant commercial properties. We only need to look at St Peter's Street as a clear example of that. In addition, there needs to be relaxation by the council regarding planning uses, classes to allow for properties like ours, which had a use category for a restaurant. It's now being used as an office. In terms of what I'd like to see for the city and the vision, many of the cities have central business districts, and I would like Derby as a city to have a central business district which is connected to the outlying areas with a greater system of connectivity. Cities' economies are predominantly driven by its businesses. More businesses in the city means a stronger economy for Derby, and that can only be a good thing.
Thank you very much, Claire. Very good. Excellent. So we're beginning to build up an agenda as to what we would need and what we would like to make Derby more successful than it currently is. Andy, Nuclear AMRC. Yes.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Andy Storer. I'm the Chief Executive of the Nuclear Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre. So I'll try not to say that again.
No, don't say that again.
I haven't got long.
No.
So Nuclear AMRC is part of a catapult network. One of 7 centres is part of a high-value manufacturing catapult. 12 months ago, government awarded the catapult 650 million over 5 years. So we have part of our funding from a government grant. We don't get the whole 650 million in one centre, we get a share of that. Part of it is through commercial research that we have to win, and then part of it is through collaborative research. I'm a professor at the University of Sheffield, but an engineer, I would say an industrialist, really, rather than a researcher. I started my career as an apprentice, so I kind of went the long way to where I've gotten to. Actually, I'm proud though that I'm now developing a centre in Symphony in Derby, because I did my apprenticeship at Symphony, and I'm from Belfast and now I live in Duffield. So although our main centre at the moment, I'll say that at the moment, is in Sheffield, we also have a centre in Birkenhead, and our third centre, I'm pleased to say, opened mid-February on Infinity Park in the Isle, temporarily in the Isle, and we plan to build a bespoke 8,000 square metre-ish facility around, start that building around 6 to 12 months. We're not just about the UK, we are having conversations in Abu Dhabi and also North Wales. So it's not just about England, it's Wales as well, we are UK. Menai Science Park. So we have a large spread. We're working with all LEPs in the UK, 38 LEPs. We work with 1,000 SMEs at the moment. We're very small, so we fight way above our weight. The thing about coming to Derby for us was really, I think as somebody said earlier, about the manufacturing base in Derby, but also the Midlands engine and the link that we can bring between Northern Powerhouse and the Midlands engine. It's one thing I want to talk about the vision. I think we've got to do far better at linking cities and linking universities and linking initiatives like Midlands engine and Northern Powerhouse. Why do I say that? Because I live in a world where it's truly global. The nuclear industry, the high integrity manufacturing industry, whether it's aerospace, nuclear, pharmaceutical, petrochemical, it's a global industry. And we have companies today competing with the government of China. We have companies today in the UK competing with the French government. You're not going to win. I tell you now, you're not going to win. Because the policies have already been set, governments have already set them. Britain is one of the only countries, in my opinion, that doesn't really set a policy. It runs a free competition. I'm not saying we should change that necessarily, but to ensure that we can win scope, we have to form partnerships better than we currently do. So my experience of coming to Derby has been quite interesting for the centre, because we got 4 vice-chancellors together, Sheffield, Derby, Nottingham-Trent and the University of Nottingham. That was very interesting to have a conversation with those 4 people. But it was difficult because not all of them want to partner. They've got their own challenges. Just like a city has a challenge with another city, and a Midlands engine has a challenge with Northern Powerhouse. So I think unless we can start to break down some of those barriers and work out how we can collaborate better, we're not going to move on from where we currently are. In terms of a vision, therefore, I guess if I put some time scale on it, by 2030, the reason I say that is because we authored a nuclear sector deal with the government. That's a 2030 deal. I would like to think we've got far better infrastructure to enable talent to come to the city. And a lot of that was mentioned already, so I won't dwell on that, but whether it be rail or road, whether it be hotels, restaurants, bars. Last night I was in Buxton watching Jules Holland. I would have loved to have watched Jules Holland in Derby, but there's no concert at the moment suitable for that. But it's like dig at schools now. I don't know, sorry if there's any head teachers here, but I sent a note out about 3 weeks ago to every secondary school in Derbyshire to say we have a big truck back at Winnibago and we'll come to your school and we'll have 10 staff on it and we'll open the sides out and young people, whether they are very early career, very early in their study, or they're about to go to GCSE levels, we'll talk to them about career options, about manufacture, not about nuclear, but manufacture. We'll come to your school, we could put it in the marketplace if we're allowed to. I had one response yet, 3 weeks. I mean, that's because they're not very interested in what we've put. But I'm going to go out to them, I'm going to try and force their hands, I'm going to go visit every school to explain to them what we're trying to do. But to me, that's an example of where I think people might just be looking in their silo and not really thinking how they could work differently. I'll probably stop there. I hope I've said some things that might provoke some questions.
Brilliant, thank you very much indeed, Andy. You certainly did. Lots of different and nice comments to Carole and to Claire as well. Adam.
There's not much left to say now, is there? Everyone said everything, so I have to say something slightly abstract, which is my norm anyway. So I've been in Derby for around 14 years now, so I'm not born and bred here, I'm not going to claim to be that. I grew up in the southeast, it's where all the cash goes, but I grew up in a place called Hastings, which was the only area of serious deprivation in the whole of the southeast at that time. The reason I say this is that when I was growing up, there was a significant media campaign which was describing Hastings as hell on sea. And as a young person growing up in that environment, that was a difficult thing to hear when you hear stats like you've got the highest level of teenage pregnancy in the country, you've got the highest rate of teenage suicide in the country, you've got the highest rate of heroin usage outside of inner city London and inner city Manchester. It doesn't create an aspirational environment for a young person to live in. And the reason I say that is I've lived in Derby for 14 years, and as Carole said, I would echo the point about partnership and about ambition. I think there is a greater sense of partnership and a greater sense of desire for change in Derby than certainly where I grew up. And I think that's positive. But, and there's always a but, the ceiling needs to be raised, and we need to keep pushing those boundaries. The 3 things I want to focus on in my 5 minutes, and Andrew will hook me off if I run over. Anyone that knows me doesn't know that I tend to waffle on, so I'll try not to. But the 3 things I want to talk about are artificial intelligence, a few eyes rolling there, smiles in the air, they've heard me talk about this before, the climate crisis, and the creative industries, and where all those 3 things are connected. Because from my point of view, there was a word that was coined in the late 90s, early 2000s, which was global. So the idea that global challenges could be approached locally. And it was all around the time when we were starting to get more of a grip and understanding what globalisation would look like. So you go to a city centre in China, I've been to Shanghai, I've been to New York, and there are bits of it. Normally the CBDs, to be honest, it's not criticism of them, but the CBDs kind of look exactly the same. It's the same brand, it's the same look and feel, there's not a lot of difference. And there's a reason for that. But that word about that global word, which is a terrible word, and it's invented by a marketeer, so I understand why it disappeared. But I think there's something in it now. The challenges that we face as a society are both international and very, very local. So if I was doing this talk in a city in Bangladesh, I would be saying, well, climate change, although for those Western countries is going to affect us, is going to affect them in maybe 20, 30 years. For us, we're on a 10, 15-year timescale, and those countries are not doing enough to help us. So what can we do on an international level to have those conversations? What we have in Derby is some of the greatest minds. Andy works with a lot of them. They're fantastically talented engineers, creative thinkers, researchers within our big companies who have potentially some of the answers and solutions to some of these global challenges. And we can be a place where we are focusing on those challenges, which will impact on our local constituents, but also impact on the rest of the world. And it's what we've always done. Think about the fact that we were at the start of the Industrial Revolution. Think about the fact that our 3 major employers are all global employers. We have that opportunity. there's a project that I'll give you as an example. It's a project which is run by an employee of Rolls-Royce, not a senior person, but it's called the Down to Earth project. And the idea is that a guy called Jamie, who I know is a brilliant person, has set up an abandoned allotment and is creating a place for communities to come together and learn about gardening, grow their own food, but also talk about mental health issues and lots of other things at the same time. Jamie is thinking about things in a global way, but approaching it in a local way. So he's thinking about climate change, but he's saying, I'm an individual, I can't change government policy, but what I can do is my own individual thing in my own community, and I can do that. And what we as a society, as a set of city leaders can do, is help facilitate more of that, and to bring those creative ideas together, whether they're senior engineers at Rolls-Royce or whether it's an individual working in their community who's got a brilliant idea. AI and automation is something I talk about a lot because I don't feel like we as a society talk about it enough. There's lots of evidence that shows that no matter which person you speak to in terms of serious economists will either tell you that AI is going to take away millions of jobs and we're going to have to move towards a society where we accept that there's not everyone works and there's different ways that we have to fund people's lifestyles, or economists will tell you that a lot of the job market is going to be massively disturbed. So traditional jobs are going to go, but new jobs are going to be created. Normally, and having studied history at A-level university before, I know that things end up being somewhere in between. So at the moment, I'm going to take it's probably somewhere in between. But whatever you take from that, jobs are going to change significantly. In Derby, we have 3 major heavy manufacturing industries, and this is not a criticism, but I'm saying it out loud because I think we need to say it out loud more and more often, who are going to change their business practices massively over the next 15, 20 years. Now, these aren't secrets, these are things that are being business planned for, and we need to be ready for that. So we need to get our skills right, we need to get our workforce right, we need to be talking about what those new jobs are now. Because in 5, 10 years' time, those jobs and some of those jobs are not going to exist. And if we don't have the right skills, we're going to have a huge generation of people that do not have the right job opportunities. And the creative industries, which I'm part of, I want to talk a bit about that as well, because the creative industries is the fastest growing sector in the UK. It's worth over £100 billion to the UK economy. The creative industries are worth more to the UK economy than the Premier League, for example. I use that as it's also worth more than agriculture, but the Premier League seems to have more resonance when I talk to business people about that. So I use that as a stat. But the reason that we sometimes don't get talked about in those grand terms is that the businesses tend to be small businesses. They might be 1 or 2 people, there might be 1 person in a shed making a thing that they sell. It might be a jewellery maker, it might be a design agency with 2 people that sat at desks but working globally. So quite often it's difficult for governments to put those stats together, but increasingly we as a nation have started to recognise the importance of creative industries, which is why Greg Clark in 2018 said that there was going to be £1 billion invested in research and policy around artificial intelligence, and a key part of that will be the creative industries playing a role in that. We have a massive growing creative industries sector in the city. Now, they don't ask for a lot, but there are ways that we can support them through business infrastructure, through offices, as Claire's highlighted, but also by putting them at the top table and taking their ideas on board. Because if we're looking for solutions to these big global problems, I don't know about you, but I want as many creative ideas in the room as possible, because the solutions are not going to be easy and they're going to be difficult for everyone, and we want everyone around that table. Couple of things. Yeah, so just in terms of AI, just to give it some context, the jobs that are most likely to go. Sorry, you're trying to make sure.
Well, I'm going to give you that point.
Okay.
I've got
hold the other one.
Hold the other one. You get another chance. I promise you.
Okay. Oh, well, I'm going to make another point. I've only got one now.
Yeah, make you one.
So the other point I make, a very good friend of mine is a virtual head teacher. Now, virtual head teachers are slightly unknown. They don't work in like a digital environment. They're not part of the matrix. They're the people that look after the education of young people who are in care within an authority. As the corporate parent Derby City Council has, there's a virtual head teacher in Derby who looks after that. Who's the current education minister? Terrible names.
Damien
Hines. Damien Hines recently made a speech about resilience. and how it's important that our young people are resilient, because all the things that I've mentioned, we're going to have careers that change all the time, we're going to have to constantly update our skills, we're going to have to be knocked back, we're going to have to deal with all these global fears and anxieties about climate change and artificial intelligence. And we need to be doing more as a society in schools and in community groups to improve the resilience of young people. As far as I'm concerned, the point I'm going to make is, as far as I'm concerned, there is no more resilient young people in our society than some of those young people that I know, the problems, the challenges that they face, just the fact that they're able to get out of bed and go to school at all because of some of the things that they've suffered shows an incredible amount of resilience. And we shouldn't ignore those young people in these conversations as well.
Very good, thank you very much indeed. So, heard from our panellists, issues of money, vision, partnership, delivery, talk about the city centre, talk about manufacturing, talk about local, talk about global, talk about issues around school, infrastructure, skills, entrepreneurship, creativity, resilience. So lots on the table, some of the ideas about where we are and indeed where we want to. So I'm going to open it out. Questions, reflections from the audience. If you could be nice and short and sharp, and I'll get my panellists to reflect on what you have to say. So just raise your hand so I can see you. On them out as best I can, although panellists of this nature, they just do what they want. So just say who you are. We've got them there, and the meeting is there at the back. So just say who you are, submit your point, and then we'll move on. You have to lift, yes, you have to lift it up and press the button. There we go.
Technology to start off with. So, Steve Ball, Chair of the Derby Renaissance Board. If we are about to see the end of austerity, and I'm not sure whether I believe that we are, but if we are, I'm not sure I can picture what that looks like. I am, however, willing to bet that it doesn't involve a guy from Westminster coming along with a big bag of money, dropping it in Carole's desk and saying, there you are, sort out everything you want to do in Derby. So if the new norm, or if the medium to long-term norm is that local authorities are going to continue to work in restricted financial circumstances, if they are going to have to continue and increasingly have to concentrate on statutory obligations, who actually guides the development of cities? Who actually continues to ensure that the economy is driven forward? Who brings people together and makes sure that change actually happens? Because that's a role that traditionally I think we've looked for councils to play. So if you're not going to be able to do that, who else picks up that challenge?
Okay, hold that thought. I mean, I'll come to you in a second, Carole. Just hold that thought. So it's a good question. Gentlemen here, just say again, press the button, say who you are.
Hello, I'm Don McClure, I'm the Council's Treasurer, and Steve's just, and I'm going to talk to you about money as well, and Steve's actually set me up very nicely. It's the point you made, Andrew, in your opening remarks, I think, when you said austerity is coming to an end because our Prime Minister and Chancellor say so.
I take politicians out there, word.
Yeah, well, I don't.
You're the wise man than I, right?
But on that very point, it would be very risky, I think, for me to recommend a financial strategy to my leadership, the Chief Executive, that austerity is coming to an end at this stage, where we're well into a financial year where the current spending review was ended. Carole referred to how important it is for local authorities, Derby, all the cities, to have absolute certainty on funding, and we just haven't got that as things stand. The spending review you referenced is coming in the autumn. It's too late in the autumn for us to really be planning with any certainty. The government fair funding review and business rates retention review has been delayed. The current models for adult social care, everybody knows on funding is broken. We're wholly reliant on one-off funding year on year. And it's hugely difficult for us to plan. Andrew, if you were me, would you recommend to my Chief Executive and my leader and the Council's Cabinet that austerity is coming to an end and we should base our forward financial planning on austerity ending?
Is that a fantastic question to me?
Yeah.
I'm not supposed to ask the chair. You know the rules in these sorts of things. Yes.
My name's Claire Twells, I'm from the University of Derby. I was just going to comment on infrastructure within the city. Claire was talking about the fact that she couldn't house, they couldn't find a place for the business to be housed within the city. However, there was a speculative build back in 2012, the Copper Box, or 1 Friargate Square, for going before, which was a speculative build in the city over 6 floors. Remained empty for I think about 18 months before the University of Derby moved in. So which way round is it? You know, do we need the businesses to come to Derby and then to be building, or do we need the buildings for the companies to come to the city?
Okay, it's a very good question, and it's a difficult one. Lots of places grapple with this question. They observe, pressures on premises, the ability to get speculative development, which is interesting. More and more councils are stepping into that sort of space, whether they should or shouldn't. Different question, but they are increasingly. Carole, austerity is at an end or not? But this point that Steve makes about how does that affect your ability to be the place shaper, to be the custodian of the place that you've traditionally done?
Well, I believe austerity is determined when I see it, but when we do see it, I think it's going to be very different from what we've seen in the past. There has been a long-standing plan by central government to transfer responsibility for funding from central to local sources. We've seen that grant has eroded, it's now practically zero. We're reliant on local taxation in its various forms to raise income. That ought to be expanded. Your question about do I think that councils still have a role in place shaping development? Absolutely we do. And I believe that very passionately because councils are unique in having a democratic mandate. We're local government, we're not local administration. And I think we've had too much of a centralist approach in the UK compared to other countries. For example, in Germany, local government is really local government. The regions have a lot of power. They're able to shape their economies. They're able to engender growth and support their local economies in a different way to where we are. Now, in this post-Brexit debate era, whatever the outcome might be, we need to seize that. We need to be able to help get inward investment. We need to be able to compete on a European and global basis. And we can't do that if we're constrained by the old-fashioned funding and arrangements of the past. So I'd be a really strong advocate for releasing some of the birdcage that's been put around local government and enabling us to take our rightful place in the new era. The other thing we can do is help channel funding, inward investment, growth and development through other routes. So working really closely with the LEP, working really closely on our regional footprint because no city is an island, and just helping to the experience we have, the connections we have, we can help others to connect and do the right thing for our place.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Claire, do you want to just reflect on Claire's point about, chicken and egg, really, is what, where we are and how we might square that situation?
Oh, I don't think you can. The point you made about the copper box, I assume that the underlying question was, well, why didn't you take that? It's perfect location. We looked at it. We liked it a lot. It's a really dramatic building, exactly what we wanted. We only wanted one occupier, and we couldn't take all the floors. So the reason that building wasn't taken soon, and I know at the time there were a number of challenges with a number of people who said, well, actually, collectively, we will all take it. We will all come together and we will take that building. But the owner wanted one occupier. I know Rolls-Royce looked at it, I know Toyota looked at it, I know we wanted it, and I know you guys got it. But the owner wanted one building. I would have given my arms and legs to have that building, but the owner wouldn't allow it. I think as a city, we need to think a little bit wider than building buildings immediately. So if we look at the private part lease cycle, Russell Rigby recently did an article in the local newspaper, and he was talking about businesses on private part wanting to come back into the city centre. We've got absolutely nowhere to go. Absolutely nowhere to go. So do we build the buildings ready, know that they want to come off private park, so let's have the buildings ready for them, or do we leave them on private park for another lease cycle and then say, okay, it's really hard.
What's the answer? Go on. We're not going to hold you to it, but
Okay.
just give me a thought on it.
I think we should start building. Let's get some space in the ground. Let's start building stuff. But we're restricted.
Yeah, okay.
So,
Andy, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you said that, because I was going to challenge you if you had to say a building.
oh, okay. Pretend I didn't say it.
Just because I use my experience of whether it be around the Camelair dockyard in Birkenhead where we've moved into, or if I open up a little bit more about why Derby, yes, it's fantastic manufacture, I won't dwell on the companies, but actually, when I spoke with the Derby City Council, there was a building and it was the pace at which we could move and do something that was the most attractive thing. Of course I wanted to come here because I'm from here and it's something personal to me. But the fact there was a building there, we wouldn't have waited 2 years to get a building built. And so there was ability to get off the pot quickly and do something, and that was the most attractive thing. The example of Sheffield, which we're trying to replicate at Infinity Park, the snowball effect of having a research capability and then others come. As I was saying to you earlier, people just gambled. They built buildings, and some are still not full, not fully occupied, but a lot of them are. And it's that pace and that ability to move that companies are attracted by. I do think therefore we've got to build and take it, hold your breath and go for it. Otherwise you just keep looking at each other.
I think two observations. One, increasingly you see firms that are located often in edge of town, out of town locations across the country now looking to relocate back into city centres. The city centre that they're in, the city they're in, or indeed the one somewhere else. Right. It's not they're going to stay where they are, going to go somewhere else. They overplay this idea that places will, firms over time stay where they are. They will move to environments that develop. And then the point I made earlier on is that as a result of that, particularly in markets where values are, at the margins, local authorities in various ways have stepped into that and have provided the first lot of investment or first lot of development, prove the case. That often is filled almost overnight. And then the second case is much easier to make. I'm not saying authorities doing that, but I think there is a reassurance that, there is track record of the trend and patterns that will reinforce that. And did you want to say anything? Or I'll go to another round.
Yeah, I kind of want to say something.
Yeah,
I guess for me, when I look at successful cities around the world, the two things that unify all of them is ambition and opportunism. And I think we have an opportunity to be really, really ambitious in Derby. Forget the A52, forget Nottingham down the road, forget Leicester. Let's talk about Paris, let's talk about Berlin, let's talk about New York. Let's talk about the things that we do at the moment that are global leading. We've got one of the world's leading photography festivals in the city. We've got 3 of the major world companies in the city. We've got the industrial hub. We've got so many things we can talk about. Let's focus on those. And 2 of the points I was going to make earlier, which do fit in this, so I am doing what politicians do, like finding a way of getting my points into the question. But 2 things I would pitch to us. One is an Institute for Social Change. So that's a combination of, going back to Steve's point about who creates the solutions, who administers, who are the people that come up with the ideas. I think it's all of us, and we've all got a role to play in that. And when I look around this room, the reason I know a lot of the people in the room is because I sit in meetings with people in this room about things that are abstract to their companies. And each of us as an individual can do those things. We can become school governors, we can join third sector boards, we can come to these meetings, we can contribute something, we can stand for election. I'm not someone that criticises politicians no matter who they are, because I know I wouldn't be brave enough to stand for election. So the fact that you've done that and you've been successful, well done. So I think an Institute for Social Change, which could be led by the university. I think there's a huge movement at the university to increase the research output. I think this would give the university a real global thing that they can hang on to. It would also address some of the challenges we've got around closing the gap, and it could be a key marker in there. And I also think we could be an eco-city. We built a hydroelectric power plant down the river, which we don't really talk about. It's an amazing thing. Well done, Derby City Council, for thinking about that and for powering this entity we've got here. And again, we've got some of the researchers at Rolls-Royce. I had a conversation with an R&D guy at Rolls-Royce once who was talking about piezoelectric technology. So energy that can be generated from someone walking or cycling along a roadway, which then takes that, you could explain it better than me, Andy, takes that energy and then turns it into electrical energy. That type of technology, that type of thinking can be used to address these challenges around climate change. And we could be a world-leading city in that. It would also help the brand of Rolls-Royce to enter Bombardier. So there's business objectives. I can find a way of selling it to them, I'm sure.
Lovely. Good. Let's take another round. Gentleman at the front. You need to press the button so it comes. That's it.
Right. Michael Coastick. I chair Enterprise for Education. Taking up Andy's point, we are both competitors at Duffield Squash Club at one stage. So, what we tend to find, Andy, is that if we go into the schools in the better areas, And we do interview techniques, CV writing, mentoring, careers talks. We did about 13,500 interventions last year. And what you tend to find, if you go into the schools in the better areas, is that you'll talk to kids there, they're doing Rolls-Royce apprenticeships, they're doing junior apprenticeships, they're switched on. If you go into the schools in the more deprived areas, it's a completely different story. There's a total lack of aspiration there. Those are the schools we would like to get into. They're also the ones that are most difficult to get into because they simply don't have the time, I suspect. It may even be the ambition to do that. So, yeah, if you want to get in with your battle pass, be happy to talk to you. I think we do have channels into those schools, so we'd be happy to help you.
Fantastic. Yeah, very good. Thank you very much. I think issues are on. My sense is some of those questions are in relation to aspiration. I think we're looking at the information is that people from more difficult backgrounds have aspirations. They just have less confidence around the fact that there are people that can help them achieve them. I think that's the difference. It's not that they lack ambition, it's just they lack the confidence that others will help them achieve the ambition where everybody else in middle class kind of families.
The thing I would like to say as well is that as employers, we're into aspiration. Yeah, we're into saying you can, or you can't. And I think that's something that we can contribute that teachers can't.
Yeah, you can and here's how. I think that's the point that I would offer as a thought on that. Yes, yeah, great. Just
cheers. Just on a slightly different vein, I mean, my observation is Derby has quite a heavyweight economy in many ways. It's quite strong and powerful, and certainly in some ways almost sort of unique nationally, has a national significance. But when it comes to a political voice at government, it feels we have a lightweight political voice nationally. And I wonder what you think we should do to change that.
okay. So this picks up the point that you started with, I think, in some respects. Carole got there quite quickly about profile, about awareness, not just in the place, but actually outside of the place, about the place, and the significance you can bring. So, Carole, do you want to say a little bit more what you started at? Just how do we get there on that? I think it's a recognisable issue, but what were we doing to make it real?
This is a very real issue because councils don't necessarily automatically have the in to government that we almost did years gone by. Civil service is very different, it's there are less of them, those that are there all doing Brexit, and so the traditional routes into government are no longer there. It's mainly through business. And so who's listening to who? 3 steps removed from people of influence. What are the networks you need to work? The stakeholder map, there's real merit in doing all of that. There's a lot of work to be done informally and behind the scenes to do all of that. But actually it has to come from a strong place where you've got a good reputation, that you are showing off about the things that you're great at, and getting away from that British modesty that we tend to have, making sure that people know. And I do think there is merit in the organisations in the city working together on that, getting a coordinated comms and marketing plan. And that's no criticism of Marketing Derby at all, they do a great job. It's about taking it to the next level and really making it into the connections that will get us the audit investment, the funding, the voice, and the access to the people who are making the decisions at national and international level.
Claire, just give me a thought on that. Your view on how do we raise the profile of the place, and in what way do we raise the profile? What are we talking about in terms of raising the profile?
We've got to use the businesses. We've got Toyota, Bombardier, Rolls-Royce, and they all have a political voice. So we need to be getting those businesses to strengthen our political voice, don't we? We need to be getting them to get the right people into the correct committees and boards so that we can strengthen that political voice. I think that's the simple solution. It won't be as simple as that, but I think that's the simple solution.
Yeah, okay. Andy? So if you want to come back on the education aspiration
Yes,
point or not, you also mentioned vision, aspiration, voice, partnership.
Yeah,
Say a little bit more.
I'm glad I did provoke a response, Mike, so thanks for that. I'll definitely take it on. I think Greg's, you're absolutely right. It's a weird thing to me that we have such large companies, just referenced there, and I go further to Bowman Curtin or JCB, and you keep going, and then you've got some of the arts and other sectors as well. It's ridiculous, therefore, that we don't really have, in my opinion, a voice at some of these central government tables. I have to say, and this isn't meant as a criticism, it's just an observation, my experience in whether it's with the Metro Mayor in Liverpool, Northern Powerhouse, Northern Powers is very aggressive. It's a very aggressive thing. I have to say, it feels quite joined up. It's probably not. There's probably lots of people arguing with behind the scenes. But when I meet it, it's one thing. And they're at it all day, every day with these people. Now, I don't know what infrastructure is in place, so because I'm kind of flying my way here. But, you know, from my observation, whether it be Heart of the South West, whether it be 38 laps, you know, whether it be the level of the cities, they don't half work as one. And I'm not saying Derby doesn't, but I think there might be something there about the plan. And let's get behind the plan, and let's find those champions, because going back to the point on building buildings, Sheffield came about not because of the blasted plan that Sheffield City Council had or a university. It was some mavericks who decided they get some money and they build some buildings, and more happened. And you need some of those, so we need to find who the champions are. I think certainly the Renaissance Board know a lot of those champions, and let's make them champions, let's make them spearhead the campaign. But it needs to be around a joint plan. And I think unless we've got that, we're always going to be looking at each other. We'll have council looking at LEP, and we'll have LEP looking at council or university, and it doesn't feel a joined up plan to me right now. And maybe I'm wrong, and maybe people really hate me saying this. It's my observation from what I've seen so far.
So we're due to finish, I mean, just in a moment or two, but if you give me a little bit of license, give me an extra 5 minutes. We'll take a couple of reflections from any more from you, and then I'll get panellists to say anything more, and we'll bring the formal proceedings to a close. So, Steve, you want to come back in? Gentlemen there, definitely.
Yeah, just on what Andy said there, because I agree that Derby hasn't been good enough in terms of getting its message out there and getting it out there consistently. But that's only half the battle, because getting people to recognise the great things that are happening in Derby is terrific. But what do we want? You know, we need to know what we're going to government to ask for, and then once we have that plan, we need to bang down every door that is there to ensure that we get it. Now, we've got a track record of doing that at times. You know, we did it out of adversity around Bombardier. We've done it around, you know, elements of trying to move the education agenda on, but we haven't done it consistently, and we don't do it with that single voice that Andy references. So that's where we need to come together, and that's where, you know, my original sort of question to Carole and others about how do we help effectively the City Council to unify the city around its core aims. I think that's something that we all need to give thought to. Certainly, you know, the DRB will do what it can, but we need to have a unified plan and a set of asks that we go and demand an answer.
Yeah, that's very good. Go on.
I just want to come back without being asked, Chair. But you know, you mentioned Bombardier. When there's a burning platform, companies or organisations work really well because it's a common goal, isn't it? Well, what's the burning platform? And if we go back to Alan's point about, I think he's absolutely right, by the way, if you look at page, whatever it is, 56, on average wage, Derby's 7th, that's a bit strange. If you look at page 44, 4th, when it comes to patents, that's amazing. But actually, it's because of companies like Bombardier, Rolls-Royce, High Tech, they could disappear. Absolutely right. In the next decade, where's Derby headquartered now? Where's Rolls-Royce headquarters? Marine in Singapore. Yeah, they move where the global economy requires them to move. They will move. Organisations will downsize because jobs will be lost through AI or VI. It's just how it's going to be. So we've got to get our heads around that. Absolutely agree with you. Plan for that, and then create that burning platform that everybody can get behind.
Okay, very good. Just
does this work?
Just press the button.
The big one.
There we go.
Jack Lindsay from Rogers Leeds. Go back to the point about bringing businesses back in the city centre. Do we need to potentially focus on bringing people back living in the city centre? You look around the city, there's a lot of development on the western Mickleover, and the ideology of living in a house with a garden. Do we need to potentially change our focus on how do we bring people to live in the city centre, and what the main focus is on improving the actual place we live in?
Very good, thank you very much, Jack. So I'm going to start there with you, Claire. Pick up any of the points around, Steve's point around the political voice and the representation needs to be clear about, you know, what it is that you want and what difference will it make, which is partly in response to you. You know, there's a genuine debate about austerity. We don't know how it's going to play out. But I think we're in an environment where whatever comes as a result of it, it is beholden upon us to engage with government and say, this is what we need. Carole was saying that earlier on, others have said it as well. this is the difference it will make if we get what we want. You know, if we get what we need, you know, this is the difference, rather than, you know, just satisfies what we, you know, makes our life slightly easier. I think, you know, different game in time.
Can I just quickly make just a quick point just about that, because I think you're absolutely right. And I think what we can do is we can sell that ambition to government about how the impact it will make on us as a local city, but how the impact it will have on their policy making for the country and for the world. And I think that's the missing gap we've got at the moment. We sometimes look too inwardly, we look too small.
Yeah, very good. Claire.
Jack's point
Yeah.
about bringing people into the city, absolutely, we've got to give them what they want. So you spoke about green sites. If you look at somewhere like Manchester, they're re-greening their city. They want to be known as the city of trees. We need to give people what they want in the city, whether that's green spaces, you know, perfect example of somewhere where we can make a beautiful green space within the city, somewhere for people to go, inner city families to go and spend some quality time, people that can't afford to go out of the city because of financial restrictions, they need that in the city, and also somewhere nice to go and have a coffee or all those things. We need to give the people what they want in the city as opposed to building it on the outside.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. Hannah, thoughts from you? Anything you haven't said, you should have said?
No, I just checked my phone to make sure there's no notes that I've made. Not good. Other things, thank you for inviting me along. I think just a bit of a plug for Nuclear AMRC. We are currently recruiting. We do have an apprentice scheme. We are trying to work with the Council of the University of Derby to create an apprentice school here. So it's not just go around schools and tell them we're here. This is about trying to get people to think about engineering manufacturing, the modern engineering manufacturing, not today's necessarily, but the future.
Alan?
Yeah, I know I've done a lot of talking, but I think the key thing I want to give is the message about listening going forward. I think we need to listen to our communities, the individuals in those communities. We need to engage with them, and we need to reflect that back. And we need to be a bit less sensitive, I guess. We need to kind of be able to say to each other that I agree with you on most things, but I disagree with you on that. I think we're wrong about that, and not get upset about it, and not get hurt about it, because we have an overall vision and an overall brand that we're trying to achieve. And that's something I don't think we've done very well in Derby. Going back to the point about Manchester and the Northern Powerhouse, you know, there's blood on the streets almost every meeting in summer from conversations I have with people that live and work in Manchester. But the overall vision stays the same. And yes, they fall out in one meeting, but the next week they're back at the same table and they're pushing towards that central vision. And central government pick up on that stuff. Because what they don't see all those other things going on behind closed doors. What they see is the vision and the collective approach that they get at the doors of Westminster. And that's what we need to be doing.
Very good. Carole, last word from you.
Well, two things. First of all, prompted by Jack really, I agree with you about the city centre. It's the heart of our city and the heart of our county. We need to make it as fabulous as we can be. It's not as fabulous as it could be at the moment. City centres are different these days. Retail is not what it was. We need that optimum mix of great living, great leisure, access to fabulous restaurants, leisure facilities, green space, all of that. And there's some work to do in Derby. Things have changed, and the fact that we're refreshing our master plan gives us a really great opportunity to do that. But then finally, it's just picking up on your point, Steve, I couldn't agree with you anymore really. We need absolute clarity on what the hell it is we want, and cement that vision, and then we all go out together in harmony, and we go get it for Derby.
Lovely, brilliant. Thank you very much. I apologise we're slightly late, but I hope you found that particularly useful and it was worthwhile an extra 5 to 6 minutes. If you can join me to thank our panellists. Thank you all for coming. Thank you very much indeed.